The Bible is more than a single book. It's a collection of 66 books of history, stories, letters, and poetry written by dozens of different authors over thousands of years that all come together to tell one big story. It's a bigger story than you can even imagine. It's a big story about a really big God and what he did to rescue us. It shows us who we are and what we were created to do. Discover the story that shows you the character of God.
Well, I'm super fired up to get to talk to you guys today about our message. But before I get to that, I just want to get to know our audience a little bit here. Do we have anybody who is having some fun cheering for the Chiefs' victory last week over the Cincinnati Bengals? Yes. That is awesome. That was quite the game, wasn't it? Sweet mercy. I didn't even watch it. I was just following the updates on my phone, and I was like, my watch was like, your heart rate is elevated. You should probably do something about this. It was crazy. But if I were to ask you guys, I think I have a sneaking suspicion of what you might say. But if I were to ask you, who is your favorite Chiefs player? Well, you know what? Just look at your small group leader and tell them on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Yes. That's what I thought you would say. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought I would hear. I thought if I asked you that question, I would hear a unanimous Patrick Mahomes. And also I heard Kelsey, because he's awesome. That is awesome. Well, here I'm going to throw out a name, and I'm going to throw out a name of somebody who I really respect, and or I should say who I think is a great football player, and that is Chad Henne. You guys, most of you guys have no idea who that is. Hold on. Listen, hold on. Now, for those of you who don't know, Chad Henne is Patrick Mahomes' backup. So if Patrick Mahomes ever gets injured, like a high ankle sprain, Henne is the one who goes in for him. Now, here's the thing. You may not know. Backup quarterbacks have to know the playbook just as well, because at any point, they could have to go and they could have to be called into the game. Their number could be called, and they might be the one that has to lead the team to a victory. But not only that, but in practice, when the defense is practicing, the backup quarterback is the one who practices for the defense. He has to study the other team's quarterback and start acting like him so the team can get ready for him, right? Now, let me ask you a question. Next Sunday, when the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, and Patrick Mahomes is holding up the MVP trophy, is anybody going to stick a microphone in Chad Henne's face and he's going to say, I'm going to Disney? No, he's not. Here's my question. Do you wonder, maybe, does Chad Henne maybe feel a little overlooked? Everybody's looking at Mahomes. Nobody's really paying attention to him. And here's my question for you. Do you ever feel overlooked? Do you ever feel like people don't pay attention to you? And I think if we were all honest, we would say, yeah. And I think if we were really honest, we would say, I've done that with other people too. Maybe you're on the basketball court and it's time to pick teams, and the team captains totally skip over you because you're shorter than all the other kids that are there. And so you get picked dead last, and it makes you feel awful. Or maybe you're at the lunchroom and you see a kid sitting by themselves and you think, well, I could sit with them, but I don't really want to do that. I'm going to sit with my friends, right? So you just move on. Or maybe you see that your best friend has a birthday at the trampoline park and they didn't even invite you to it. You find out about it on social media. Ugh, right? Man, that feels like a gut check, doesn't it? Makes you feel a little bit sick. So here's my question for you. Okay, here's the big question for today. How can we be people who show respect to everybody and make them feel included? That's our big idea. It's respect. It's showing others they're important by what you say and do. And so today we are going to go to the Gospel of Luke. Everybody say Luke. Luke chapter 5. Now this story is recorded in 2 other Gospels. You'll find it in the Gospel of Matthew, and you'll find it also in the Gospel of Mark. And so we're going to find out about a time when Jesus was choosing the people who would be in his inner circle. Now, so far we've talked about how Jesus was baptized and God descended on him, and the Spirit of God descended on him, and the voice of the Heavenly Father boomed out of heaven, "This is my Son with whom I am pleased." It was amazing. Then we found out after that Jesus was led into a desert where he didn't eat for 40 days. please. And in that time, he was tempted by the devil to do terrible things that would worship the devil, but Jesus refused and he stayed strong. And last week, we learned how Jesus started to do miracles, and people were starting to follow him and ask questions about him. Well, our story today picks up where Jesus is talking to a crowd. He's by a place called the Sea of Galilee. Mr. Jacob's seen it in person, haven't you, Jacob? I bet it was awesome to see that. And so he's at the Sea of Galilee, and he's preaching by the shore. That's a tongue twister. And as he's preaching, there's a crowd that gathers. People want to hear what he has to say about God. People want to see what's he going to do next. Who's he going to heal? What miracle's going to happen? And so this crowd is coming, and the crowd gets so big, he looks over and sees some guys, and he sees a boat, and he goes and climbs in the boat so he can get more room. They take the boat a little bit offshore, and he starts teaching. He continues teaching again. Well, the time comes for his teaching to be done, and he talks to the people who are in the boat with him. Now, here's what you should know. The person's boat that he went into, his name is Simon. Now, you might know him as Peter. And so Simon was a fisherman. That's what his job was. He would catch fish. He would sell them. That's how he made a living. We actually know that Peter was married. So that's pretty interesting. As far as I know, I think he was the only disciple who was. That's pretty interesting. And so here's Peter. And this is what Jesus tells him. Now, at this point, the night before, Peter was out all night fishing. Okay, has anybody ever pulled an all-nighter? Yeah, nobody's pulled an all-nighter in here fishing and doing, this was hard work. It wasn't like, hey, I'm on a break, here's my fishing role, right? Jesus was doing incredibly hard, Peter was doing incredibly hard work. They spent all night doing this. They didn't catch a single thing. And so here's what Jesus said. Jesus told Peter, take the boat out a little bit deeper. Just take the boat out a little bit deeper, cast the nets out. And Peter was like, listen, Master. It's interesting that he called him Master because this is when they first met. He said, Master, I've been fishing all night and haven't caught a thing. But because you have said this, we'll do it. And so as Jesus goes out in the boat with him, they throw their nets out. And to Peter's surprise, this net is loaded. It is booming. It's bustling. It is full. As a matter of fact, it's so heavy it starts to sink the boat. They got to call in a couple guys from the shore to bring their boat in to haul this load off. Now, at this point, Peter is like, Jesus, you are perfect. I am not. I don't deserve to be around you. You should go away because I'm a sinner. And what Jesus said to Peter was amazing. He said, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. I will follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Now, when I was your age, I used to think that was really weird. I pictured like some dude with a fishing pole, like catching a grown man on it, like a piece of cheese or something. Okay, you got me. That's not what he's talking about. He's saying, you're going to come with me. You're going to be in my inner circle. And not only that, you're going to help other people get to know the Son of God. And immediately, Peter followed Jesus. As a matter of fact, if you read the account of this, it says that he didn't even take the time to get rid of his fish. He just followed Jesus. That was an unlikely person that Jesus invited to follow him. But then it goes on. Listen to this. It says we're going to talk about somebody else now. And who we're going to talk about is somebody named Matthew. Now, if you know your Gospels in the Bible, the first 4 books of the New Testament, there's Matthew, there's Mark, there's Luke, and there's John. This is the same Matthew. One little bonus thing. I don't know if I'll tell the other services this, but I'll tell you guys because you're awesome and you should know this. And it might confuse you one day. But when you read different accounts of the Gospel, if you read the Gospel of Luke or Mark, you'll see that this name talks about Levi, but if you read Matthew, his name is Matthew. Well, it's talking about the same person. Now, it could be that it's the same name just in different languages. It could be that Levi had his name changed from Levi to Matthew when he followed Jesus. We don't really know, but it's the same person. That's good to know, right? Now, here's what you should know about Matthew. Matthew was a tax collector. Yikes. Who said IRS? Yeah, it's kind of like that. Now, you and I, we hear that and we think, okay, cool, this guy gathered a bunch of money, but it's even more than that. He was Jewish, but he worked for the Romans. The Romans were rulers over the Jewish people, and they were hard on their people. They collected all the taxes. And so what the Romans did is they hired Jewish people to take money from their own people. And not only that, hey, pay attention. Not only that, these tax collectors would charge extra. So if they owed Rome $50, they would charge $100, and they would take that extra and they'd put it in their pocket and they'd pay themselves. Now you can imagine the Jewish people who were around when they saw a tax collector. They probably sounded kind of like that car. They were like, they didn't want to be seen with them because they were frustrated with these people. Tax collectors were the outcasts of society. But Jesus walks up to Matthew, sitting in his tax collector booth, which would be something that's just totally brings shame on his people. And he tells Matthew, follow me. Follow me. Now, you know what? You'd think Jesus would have picked one of the most knowledgeable rabbis, or Jesus would have picked somebody who was strong and, could be part of his mission with him. But Jesus picked Matthew. And once again, there's that word that comes up. Immediately, Matthew stood up and he followed Jesus. He left everything behind. He was probably pretty wealthy because of the money that he collected, but he left that behind and he followed Jesus. And I love what Matthew did next. Listen to this. Matthew invited Jesus to come to his house, and he threw a party. Now, other Jewish people probably wouldn't be caught at that party. It was probably a bunch of other tax collectors. They probably banded together so they could, have somebody. But here's Jesus at this party, and I just imagine, they're just having a great time. Jesus is being Jesus, including people who are often left out. And guess who's there? The religious leaders. The religious leaders who are just making sure that everybody follows every rule to the T. And what they start saying, who is this guy? He's hanging out with tax collectors, and he's hanging out with sinners. What kind of rabbi or teacher is that? But Jesus heard them, and this is a mic drop moment. Get ready for it. Jesus said, healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. I have not come to get those who think they are right with God to follow me. I have come to get sinners to turn away from their sins. You see, Jesus didn't come to make bad people good. Jesus didn't come to make good people better. Jesus came to bring people who were dead to life, spiritually dead to life. That's what Jesus did. And when he went about his ministry and he was preaching the gospel and he was doing miracles, there was a group of 12 people who were with him who were really close. You know them as the disciples. These disciples got to see firsthand all the things that Jesus did. Jesus spent more of his time with these disciples than with anybody else in the crowds. He spent time teaching them, and eventually these disciples would go on to carry out the mission of the gospel. Peter, who was a fisherman, turned into a preacher that preached at a day called Pentecost when thousands of people accepted Christ and put their faith in him. A fisherman turned into one of the greatest preachers the world had ever seen. Here's the thing. Here's what it comes down to. Jesus often included the outcasts, the people who are left out. And so as we think about the question that I asked you at the very beginning, how do we show respect to everybody? How do we make people feel included? Well, ultimately, it comes down to how you see yourself and how you see God. One of my favorite stories is the selection of King David. Way back in the Old Testament, in the book of 1 Samuel, you find out about when God tells the Israelites, I'm going to select a new king for you. King Saul, he is out, and there's a new king, and I'm going to select it for you. And he sent Samuel to go to a place to pick the new king. And all these guys looked, big, tall, handsome, everything that you'd want from a king, but God said none of them. You want to know who God selected? He selected David. And this is what he said. I'm actually just going to read it to you because this is so good. And this is going to change the way that you think about respect. This is going to change the way that you think about yourself. And this is going to change the way that you think about others. He said, the Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outside of a person, but the Lord looks at what is in his heart. You see, when you're standing at the basketball court, people are often looking, saying, who's got the best high jump? When you're at the lunchroom, and you're at the table, a lot of times people are saying, who's got the most friends I can sit with? But what God is saying, he's looking at your heart. And that's good news. Here's the thing. You are made in God's image. You are made in God's image. That there is no other creature or creation under the sun that can say that. Humans. That's it. You are made in God's image. God breathed his breath in you. And maybe you feel like that person. Maybe you feel left out. Maybe you feel overlooked. Maybe you spend hours a night crying because your friends made videos that you weren't even a part of, and that broke your heart. Can I just tell you that Jesus gave everything so that you could be included in his family? He left heaven, a perfect place. He came down. He lived the perfect life that nobody could, and he was nailed to a cross willingly. Died and he came back to life so that you could be included in his family. That's how much he loves you. But guess what? Look to the person next to you. He loves that person that much too. You see, when you begin to see yourself as made in the image of God, you realize the people around you are. The kid on the playground who's left out, he's made in the image of God. The girl that's is not being involved in the other classroom activities because the other girls think she's weird, she's made in the image of God. So here's the thing. Include people who are left out. I showed you some pictures earlier, but I'm going to show you another spot where somebody may feel left out. And I think it's important to talk about this. Right here in Studio 45. You know what? We are a church that's all about people coming here that don't go to church yet. And there might be somebody who doesn't feel like they're included. There might be somebody who feels like, hey, maybe I'm not really part of this small group. Here's my challenge to you. Look for them. Be their friend. Say an encouraging word to them and include them in what's happening. When you do that, not only are you respecting that person, but you're respecting God and his creation. Let me pray for you. God, you're such a marvelous creator. You made each of these boys and girls in your image and with a purpose and a plan for their life. I pray that as we talk about respect this month, that we would just realize what a huge thing it is that you've included us, just like Matthew and just like Peter, the people who seem least likely to be your closest followers, but yet you include us as well. And I pray that will change how we see other people, that we will demonstrate compassion and kindness and humility and patience and gentleness to those who are around us. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.